Thanks to our panel for joining us today. If it would be possible for you to briefly introduce yourself and how you're here today and your relationship with stomach cancer.
Yep. My name is Tony Leonard. I was diagnosed with Leonard plastica when I was 39 years old, 6.5 years ago.
Sure, I'll go. My name is Christy Leonard. I'm a caregiver to Tony. I'm also his wife. Been doing this, like I said, like he said, for 6.5 years. We have 5 amazing boys that have also been part of the journey. So it's a different perspective. We're blessed to have one of them with us today.
Hi, my name is Alec Leonard. I am the son of Tony. He was diagnosed with cancer when I was a freshman in high school, so I was 15 years old. And we've been helping him fight this fight for the past, 6.5 years? Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So, again, I was diagnosed 6.5 years ago with Leonard plastica, which is a rare form of stomach cancer. It attacks the lining of the stomach. I was 39. It was February of 2012. I went in and it was a very fast-moving, fast-paced visit to the surgeon. I went in on a Monday and he removed my stomach. It was a total gastrectomy on that Friday, and it was my son's 4th birthday, sorry. After that, I came out. I was diagnosed with stage 3B. They removed my stomach. It was, at the time, we didn't know a whole lot about stomach cancer. We tried to reach out, and nobody else knew a whole lot about stomach cancer. After that, I had multiple surgeries. They ended up removing my gallbladder. March of 2017, I had a reoccurrence. I went in for a double whammy, as they kind of call it, and they did a upper endoscopy and a colonoscopy. When they did a colonoscopy, they couldn't get the camera through my colon, which ended up being a surprise. And my stomach, or my colon, was blocked off. It was a reoccurrence of the cancer. I went back in and under surgery in March, and it ended up being in my transverse colon, my pancreas, and my spleen is in it, what they ended up removing during that time. My whole family was shocked, and we kind of didn't know where we were going to go from there. It was very impacting. You want to go?
Yeah. So I know we have a really special circumstance. We do this patient and caregiver panel at all of our symposia, but this is the first time we've had an entire family here, although it's not your entire family, but it's representative of all 3 of you here, parents, spouse, caregiver, and children. So Christy and Alec, I'll ask you also. Christy, what can you tell us about the caregiver, the spouse's experience of hearing the diagnosis and the treatment and what your family's been through?
So I'll be honest with you. When Tony's cancer came back, I was so angry because I knew so much at this point about stomach cancer. Because when Tony was first diagnosed, immediately we got involved. So we were attending these same symposias, we were, researching, and we were giving back because Tony was in, remission, if you will. So of course, when the news came, I like to tell a lot of caregivers, and our doctors and oncologists tell us the same thing: follow your gut. So my gut told me that the cancer was back. And so I just kept digging and screaming and stomping my feet until I got an answer. And unfortunately, we were right. And, you know, from my perspective, I like to tell everyone that unfortunately, I had a chance to learn from my mistakes the first time. That's why I say unfortunately, because we're having to go through it again. So the way we told the boys was different than the first time. We sat them all down together as opposed to telling them individually. Instead of keeping everything quiet and just between Tony and I branched out to our friends in the community and the medical community and said, I need your help, and I wasn't afraid to ask for help. The second time around, I'm still struggling with that, with little things, but big things I'm pretty good at. But I will say this, the entire time throughout the whole journey, I've made the biggest caregiver mistake, and that is not taking care of myself. My focus has always been Tony and the boys. So making sure that they're informed of what's going on with their dad, making sure that if they have questions, they get answered, and whatever their concerns are and how it could be affecting their day-to-day life, that's been my focus.
That's a lot to carry.
A little bit.
Alec, you had mentioned when your dad was first diagnosed, you were only 12, and
15.
I'm sorry,
He was 15.
15. I'm sorry, 15. Can you tell us what that was like for you, and maybe even as an experience with your brothers?
It was challenging. It was different. I really didn't know much about cancer at the time. All I knew is it killed people, honestly. And that's how I seen it at first. And so having to adjust, I guess, to everything, you know, my dad going from being this big, like, macho man, you know, to you know, we can't even go outside and, you know, play or throw like a football around or anything. It was just it was challenging, and not only was that challenging, but like emotionally, at the house, you know, everything was different. You know, it just wasn't as bright and as I guess as happy as things were. But I just try to make the best out of everything I get, and so, you know, even with him being sick, I still try to come in the house and put a smile on his face and you know, still be the best son that I could be for him. So.
After the first round, we didn't know a whole lot about stomach cancer. But the second time around, after we had learned and did our research, the whole family kind of knew what was going on. And I'll never forget it, but one of the main questions that was asked by the littlest one was, what stage is it, Dad? Not how are you feeling or anything else. He wanted to know what stage the cancer was. And when he heard it was stage 4 is when he started to break down and cry. Now that's coming from a 4-year-old child, not anybody else, not the older ones, but from the little ones. So that was pretty impacting to me.
Thank you. So from each of your perspectives as a patient, as a caregiver, and as a child and family member, what would you say was the most challenging aspect during treatment, diagnosis, at any point?
Balance. I say that every time I talk. From a patient or from a caregiver perspective, we're balancing the patients, our spouses, or our loved one. I actually had the honor, I will say the honor and privilege of also being Tony's mom's caregiver. And so being a caregiver in the relationship, you have to find a balance between work and taking care of the kids and taking care of yourself. And that's such a challenge. Mm-hmm. So I always encourage people to go up and down every aisle in the grocery store to take a little extra time for themselves. But it's finding the balance, and asking for help is still, I think, a lot of caregivers will probably relate to me is asking for help. It's still,
How to?
yeah, everyone's like, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I posted on Facebook. Like, I'm like, hey, who wants to come help mow the grass? You know, and then people say, well, don't you have 5 boys? And I'm like, yes, but don't you understand they're also emotionally beat down too? So sometimes we could, you know, use some help with that or whatever. But actually, like, calling people up and saying, I need your help, you know, is still a challenge.
Tony?
One of the other biggest things was not knowing, is there going to be a tomorrow? You know, I'd burned up so many other resources. The first time around, I didn't know what was left as far as chemo, radiation, feeding tubes, because I couldn't get any more feeding tubes put back in me. So eating was also a huge challenge because my diet was just terrible. You know, I couldn't eat regularly. I was throwing up so much. So what was going down was getting stuck, and it was coming right back up. The first time around, I had feeding tubes, so I wasn't really worried about anything eating-wise. You know, my nutrition was shakes. This time around, it was totally different.
Try cereal.
Yeah, so, yeah, I eat dry cereal. That's what keeps me alive. And sitting there munching on dry cereal and potato chips. So it sounds funny, but truthfully, you know, that's kind of what it is.
One of my biggest challenges was, even though I'm not the oldest son, I was the oldest son in the household. So, when you have your brothers coming up to you, asking you stuff, and you're not really sure what the answer is, you have to make sure that you stay as strong as you can for them, and for your family in general, because they're gonna look to you for a guidance, for a way, and even though it might have looked like I was fine or I was doing okay, you know, it was like a part of me was dying inside, you know, because of my father being as sick as he was. But it's made me a lot stronger though today. He's taught me a lot of things, and he's helped me become a man. And so through all the struggle and everything, though, it was still a good outcome, I feel like.
Alec, I'm curious because you said when you introduced yourself you didn't really know anything about cancer personally. Right. And being the oldest sibling, did you have anyone to look to relatable in your position? Like, did any of your friends have a similar experience?
No, honestly, I didn't really have anybody who I was close to, whose parents were sick. Really, my family was really all I had. And so, yeah, between my mom, my dad, and Christy, they have helped me a lot in these past 6.5 years. Really stay positive and always be optimistic, no matter what the circumstances are.
I mean, the boys really didn't have anybody to grab a hold of and look to except for each other. They didn't have a lot of friends who had instances like we had. They pretty much only had each other. So in a lot of instances, they looked at each other to seek guidance.
Yeah, my brothers were a huge help through all this. Even though sometimes it stressed me out and drive me crazy, it was always nice to have a brother there to talk to, though.
That's good. Great. So what else, other question I'd like to ask before we open it up to questions from the room or from the webcast, what tips or advice would you give someone who will be in your role, who's either newly diagnosed with cancer or is struggling with an issue with cancer?
So I have like 3.
Okay. I wouldn't expect less.
Yeah, you know, I'm listening to us, you know, how this is all going, and there's so many things like so many things I want to say and shake into caregivers. Because this is so, a lot of times, like, as a caregiver, you have no idea what to ask. You're going in with your warrior, as I call them. You're going in, you're sitting with the doctor, and it could be the first time you're going for your upper GI, or it could be the first time you're sitting with your oncologist or your surgeon, and you're sitting there and you have no idea what to ask them because you don't know what is about to happen. So it's hard to say, you know, I didn't know the first time to say, well, what clinical trials do you have going on? Like, I had no idea. So, you know, there's a lot of, that's why I really support and am proud to be part of Debbie's Dream Foundation, because I stumbled across Debbie's Dream Foundation looking for a wife that, because Tony was like really stressing me out. He was like done with his treatment and trying to still do normal things. And I was like, you can't do that. And it would drive me nuts. And so I stumbled across Debbie's Dream Foundation and was looking for another wife that I could just kind of like talk to that understood it. But the wealth of knowledge that, you know, we've developed so many things like the, you know, Stomach Cancer 101, where there's like a list of questions to ask your doctor. So I think if you walk into a room with your doctor for the first time, I tell everyone, write down your questions before you go in. So you can literally, I literally have a notebook, and it's full of questions from like the first time we met our oncologist, and I was laughing because I said, oh, look, I asked about that clinical trial and it's now happening. But so that's on the medical side of it, is write down all your questions. If you have kids, have your kids write down questions. This one at the end of the table asked if his dad was ever going to be able to ride roller coasters again. I mean, that was important to him. So listen to your kids, what their questions are, because they're important. That's my medical advice. My caregiver spouse advice is don't forget why you're fighting the relationship that you have. That's probably my big stickler. It's really, really, really easy to get wrapped up in the medical side of things that you often forget that you're still married to your warrior. It's really easy for me to cuss Tony out because he didn't drink a protein shake that day, and forgetting that he's in pain and he's hurting and he really just doesn't want to have one that day. And so I just need to curl up in bed with him and tell him it's okay and I still love you regardless. You don't yell at your kids because your kid doesn't want to take Tylenol because their throat hurts. You say it's going to be okay, and maybe I can mix it with this, or maybe I can mix it with that. So you have to do the same thing for your spouse. When Tony's cancer and journey and progression got worse and worse, I started realizing, ooh, Lord Jesus, I'm not doing this today.
Take a break.
The protein shakes don't matter. The time with your loved ones matter, and that quality matters. So listen to your spouse, your warrior, your patient, whatever, because if they're tired, as hard as it is to accept it, you need to listen to them. And if they are just not wanting to get out of bed that day, lay in the bed with them. And if they want to have pizza and they can't come to the kitchen table, have a pizza party in the bedroom. That's my advice. Because that's why we're doing this. At the end of the day, we fight cancer because I know eventually it could take us out, and we're just trying to enjoy the time that we have left.
A big one is don't be afraid to tell your kids. There's so many people that don't want to tell their kids what's going on. I mean, they're part of the journey just as much as the next family member is. And they see the change that you're going through. Your hair is falling out. And they're like, Mom or Dad, why is your hair falling out? You know, why don't you feel good today? Why can't you play basketball with me? You know, instead of making up, you know, lies or trying to give them excuses. You know, sit them down and tell them, Daddy's sick. You know, or Mama's sick. It's really important for them to know and for them to go through the journey with you. Then try to make something up. You know, embrace them as much as you embrace your next loved one. They love you just as much as your wife, your husband does. That's my advice.
Alec, what advice would you give someone?
My advice, like I said earlier, is try to stay as optimistic as you possibly can, because it'll really help. You stay happy, you stay as positive as you can. Other people see it, and it rubs off on them. It makes them want to have see a brighter side to it. And also, the main tip I can give you is just to enjoy every moment that you spend with them, because you never know when it could be the last one, or it could be the start of a new journey. Because with cancer, you never know what's gonna happen. So you pray, you hope for the best, and like I said, just enjoy every moment that you have to spend with them, because it could be your last, and you know, in the blink of an eye.
Thank you.
So.
I'm just going to piggyback real quick. And Alec and I talked about this earlier, and Austin, who's 18, is about to do this too. Don't be afraid to go away to college, guys. You want to talk about that?
Don't be afraid to, like she said earlier, take care of yourself. Do the things that you want to do in your life, even with everything going on, because that's what they want for you as well. They don't want to see you sad, see you sitting there crying and upset. They want to see you out enjoying your life, making the most out of it, and being the son or daughter that they raised you to be. And I feel like that's also very important.
Thank you all. That's evidence of what a strong family you have there, and thank you all for sharing that with us. I'd like to open it up if there's any questions from the audience for the Leonards. We have a microphone coming to you.
So this is, I'm a healthcare provider. I'm going to be up there in just a minute. And I know you guys are very positive. I got the energy from the positive. But and I hope that you take this as it's intended. What would be something that you would say your doctors or whoever your team was, it's multiple people, I know that. What would have been one or two things you might say, well, guys, you could have done this a little bit better? Now, I know we stumble every day. But if you said, well, here's one or two little things that you probably didn't pay much attention to that would have been really helpful. And again, just to help me, maybe one or two things, if you can think of it, where it's like, well, here's a little one or two things that somebody did that was extremely helpful that they probably didn't even realize it was that significant. That's kind of a hard thing to answer on the fly. I mean, usually what I'm trying to avoid is saying, yeah, I had this jerk of a radiation oncologist. I'm a radiation oncologist.
Right.
I'm not looking for that at all, because that, who can fix that? But maybe there's one or two things you might say the experience would have been better if maybe one or two of these things had been different.
That's a great question.
I love radiation because that's where Tony's pain comes from. Sorry. So, so I think the hardest thing is, because I'm struggling with it, if I had known something that could have been different, is laying out, and I'm thinking this and I'm thinking it out loud. So you go in and they say, okay, we're going to do this drug, we're going to do this treatment, and this is what your treatment plan is. And you say, okay, not a problem. But never do you hear a doctor say, if you'd like to go for a second opinion, or this is why I'm choosing this method, and these are going to be all of, or possibly what your side effects are going to be. Is this something you still want to do? the reason I bring that up and I mention that is because I have seen, and as you know, Dr. Blackstock, there's a lot of people that don't get to do Tony's journey for 6.5 years, right? So would we have done radiation? Would we have taken his stomach out? Would we have done A, B, and C had we known? I don't think I would change anything medically, but I would have liked to known I would have liked someone to be a little bit more real with me about making memories and go do those things that you want to do with your family, because realistically, we're going to do all this, guys, and I don't know if you're going to be here in a year and a half or 2 years. And don't be afraid to say that, because that's what we're looking for, truthfully. Like, we want to know, like, and maybe ask your patient, do you want to know what we're looking at timeline? Because a lot of times some doctors, they don't like to give you timeline in case they're wrong, but realistically, like, we need to know. Like, I need to know if doing this radiation is going to give me 2 months, or not doing this radiation is going to give me a month. Well, I'm going to do 2 months, but it's going to be, like, horrible, and you're going to be in pain, you're going to be sick all the time, or I can enjoy that 1 month of quality of life. You know what I mean? I think that's really, really important. It's just kind of...
Yeah.
So we only have about another minute, but Tony,
okay.
if you have an
Yeah,
answer.
real quick. Don't be afraid to ask. You know, there's a lot of questions, and, you know, and do your research. And don't be afraid to ask your doctor, or like Christy said, get a second opinion. You're not going to hurt anybody's feelings if you try to get a second opinion. There's always 2 different ways to look at one thing.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Christy, Tony, and Alec. This has been very helpful, and thank you for sharing with us.